Kia ora e hoama, kua hui mai nei ki tēnei suitopa ki te whakatakoto I ngā kaupapa o te Getting Grant Ready. Ki te whakawhanaunga hoki ki te rongo me te ako. He mihi nui tēnei ki tō mātou hoa hono ko Ruth Button ki Strategic Grants ki whakaako ia I a mātou I tēnei wā. He mihi nui tēnei hoki ki tō mātou kai awhina ko Sally, tātou ko Peter, ko Ian, ko Emily. He mihi nui tēnei ki a koutou, he pai ki te whakatau I a koutou. Ko Ronya Ivers ahau, he kai whakahaere kaupapa ki Hui E Community Aotearoa. Nō reira, hui noa I te whare. He karakia tīmatanga tēnei. Mauri ora ki runga, mauri ora ki raro, mauri ora ki wainga nui I a tātou I hui mai nei. Hui E, tai ki e. Kia ora everybody, it's really lovely to see you all joining us for this second session of our spring series, Getting Grant Ready. Last week we talked about fundraising more broadly and how to kickstart your fundraising strategy. So really great to see some of you back today. Some new faces, some familiar faces. And yeah, it's really lovely to see you. I want to give a special welcome to our partners and supporters, Ruth Button from Strategic Grants. And we're also joined by some of our volunteers and professional grant writers, Sally, Peter, and Emily, and Ian. And you'll hear more from them in the second half of our session. So my name is Ronya Ivers. I'm one of the project managers at Hui E Community Aotearoa. We're a peak body for the wider tangata whenua community and voluntary sector. And I'm also joined by our Pokarahi General Manager, Rochelle Stewart-Allen, and Sakram Munasa, who recently started with us as our second project manager as well. We're recording this Hui, and I ask you to please mute or remain on mute throughout the session. We'll invite you to keep your video on. And also, if you see at the bottom of your screen, there's some emojis that we'd love you to use as a reaction to what you hear. And also, we'll invite you to let us know where you're based and the organization that you're from. If you want to pop that in the chat, that'd be great. And we can kind of find out where you're zooming in from, if you haven't already. So before I ask Ruth to introduce herself and talk about Getting Grant Ready, we'd like to know a little bit more about your own experience with grant funding, and ask you to complete a very quick poll that I'll ask Rochelle to bring up, and that will really help us tailor our responses throughout the session. So Rochelle, can I ask you to release our poll? So our poll question is, how confident are you with grant writing? Can you all see the poll? Should pop up on your screen. Great, I can see some heads nodding. So it's if you have experience or are confident with writing funding applications, from very confident, confident, somewhat confident, not confident, unsure, or other. So I'd really love to hear from you. We encourage you to use the chat function during the session and ask comments, ask questions, make comments. There's also no wrong answer, no wrong question. There's probably a wrong answer, but there's no wrong question. And really want it to be an open and honest conversation. And it's really about you gaining as much as you can from this session. So we want to be guided by your questions as well throughout the next hour. And so what you can expect is to hear from Ruth about what you need to make sure your organization is grant ready. And she has some takeaways for you to help you apply for funding. And in the second half, we'll break into smaller groups to give you an opportunity to discuss your approach, how you approach some of the funding application questions that you come against. And you'll be supported in your groups by some of our very experienced grant writers that are on this session as well. Can we have a look at the poll result, Rochelle? I might need you to read them out. That's okay.
So we've got very confident 26%, 6 people. Confident is 13%, 3 people. Somewhat confident is 43%, 10 people. Not confident is 9%, 2 people. Unsure is 9% as well, and other is 0.
Great. So somewhat confident, I think that's where the majority sits. Great, thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I'd like to now hand over to Ruth to give her presentation. Thanks, Ruth. Over to you.
You're I'll just start screen sharing. Just checking, can you all see my screen? Is it good? Oh, good. Okay, welcome everybody, and it's really lovely to be here and talking to you. I hope you're all keeping safe during the lockdown. I know some of you, like myself, will be in Auckland in our extended lockdown, so yeah, hope you're all doing okay, and hopefully we'll see a light at the end of the tunnel soon. So yeah, just quickly a little bit about me. So I've been doing grant writing and just general kind of grants fundraising for probably about long time, 20 years now. So started in the UK, and then I've worked for a few organisations over here, Mental Health Foundation, Lifeline, Presbyterian Support Northern. So yeah, a few, and now I'm with Strategic Grants and helping lots of organisations, which is great. So at Strategic Grants, we're a mission-driven business, and really our job is to build the capacity of the not-for-profit, for-purpose organisations in New Zealand and Australia. And that can be like from the really, really tiny ones to the kind of large ones with like $1 million incomes or more. So yeah, it doesn't really matter the size. What we kind of teach is things that can be used by all organisations in their grants fundraising. So yeah, our goal is to give you the tools and the knowledge and the experience to work and to expand your grant seeking and your success with your grant applications. Oh, just as well, so Ronnie was saying about questions. Probably best if you pop them in the chat, and then we can go through some questions at the end of the presentation, and that would be great. So just looking a little bit at the sort of grants landscape that we're in at the moment, I'm sure you're all aware that there've been additional challenges with COVID and the pandemic and lockdowns, and just making fundraising a whole lot more difficult than it already was. But what that's meant is we just need to keep on top of all the rapidly kind of changing deadlines and the funding announcements. And also, we saw some of those funding rounds shift. Funders weren't sure what they were going to do, and so they put rounds on hold and things. So for a while there, it was quite sort of shaky ground. And I think, we've seen that a little bit again now as well, with some of the gaming trusts temporarily putting their grant rounds on hold. So it's been quite a difficult time, and I think that's why more than ever, you need to have all those tools in place to make sure that your grants program is really healthy and on track. Also, there was uncertainty with sort of organisational leadership, what projects to run, could they run projects, did you need to redeploy staff into other areas? Also, some organisations we know put their recruitment on hold, so it may be that your fundraising team was short, both due to the hold on recruitment and also to having to do other work just on the ground, like maybe delivering food parcels or something like that. So it has been a really tricky time. Also, then the other side of that is, as well as for the organisations, it's been a tricky time for funders too. So they had their own challenges. As I've already said, for some of them, the gaming trusts, for example, they had to close down because they weren't getting money from the venues. So they temporarily put their grant rounds on hold. Some funders, they had to shift their focus, moving away from what they would normally focus on the immediate need of organisations with the pandemic. And some nations had to, so some of the investments that the funders had to shift because they hadn't got so much money from their own investments, so their grant distribution would have been affected. yeah, and sadly, the other thing that came out of that was we've heard that funders have had more ineligible applications just because, you know, I think people are so desperate to get funding that they've just been applying for anything and everything. And so what we're trying to sort of teach is to take a much more strategic approach and be much more targeted in your fundraising. And then that way is part of the kind of process of getting a better success rate. Okay. So this is just a little quote from one of the funders that we work with, who said that, you know, more than ever now, funders will be examining organisations' capacity to deliver projects. They want to see that you've considered your business continuity plan and reviewed your strategic plan. And if you've changed your funding needs, then be clear about this and how you're managing your finances. So it's really just about, even no matter what size your organisation, just having a plan and being able to articulate that to the funder, so that, you know, they know that you've got a sort of risk management in place and what you're going to do in situations such as lockdown to keep going with your organisation and keep your delivery going as best you can. Yeah, and there have been some positive changes from grant makers. It's been a difficult time, but they have they've been increasingly acknowledging the need for capacity building funding for organisations. They've dipped into some of their own reserves and their corpus to try to keep their funding at the same level and not to have to reduce it too much. There've been cases of offering interest-free loans to the sector, just being innovative and looking at different ways to support. And there's also been like discussion about allowing the not-for-profit organisations to kind of redeploy their funding and use it in the areas where they know that it's needed. And that's okay. It's just always about keeping your funder involved and keeping them informed and asking before you make changes to your grant projects. But at the same time, funders still want to know the impact of their funding. So you need to be able to go forward and be clear about the impact and the outcomes that your funding and your projects are going to make with their funding. So don't forget about that as well. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to this and hopefully give you some little tips and tools to check out where your organisation in terms of grants program readiness is. We've got a little health check that we've devised, and it's just to really identify where you need more resources and support for your grants program, and to have some practical places and to start with that as well. So hopefully you've got a pen and paper. If not, could you just grab one, because you just need to write down some quick scores against some questions that I'm going to ask you as well. Just give you a quick minute.
Just while everybody's grabbing their pen and paper, just to confirm, we will make those slides available to everybody.
Okay, so let's kick off. So this is our grants program health check, where we can assess your processes against questions to see where the gaps are in your current strategies and your current grants fundraising. So as we go through the questions, I just want you to score yourself. So 1 obviously is going to be never. So something you don't do that at all in your organisation. 2 seldom, 3 sometimes, 4 often, and 5 always. So that's something that you're really hot on and you're always up to speed with it. So let's have a look. Okay. Oh, sorry. So those are the scores. Just to quickly look again, just make a note of those. So 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. Okay, so here's the first question. So internal project and planning and development of your projects. So do you have agreed processes for internal project planning? So when you go to one of your project managers for information about your project that you're going to apply for, do they have all the information to hand? Or is it a really long, painstaking process that they haven't got all the information that you need and you've got to dig around for it, and it's actually really difficult. So what we're looking for here is that you've got those kind of agreed processes in place. So, you know, when funding comes in, is the project grant ready? So that whole process from being planned to knowing what the project is to when the grant comes in, is everyone on board with that and knows what they've got to do? So that's the first question. Give yourselves a score from 1 to 5. Okay, so moving on to number 2. This is what we find with a lot of organisations. They don't actually have this project wish list. And basically, it's a prioritised list of all the projects that you're fundraising for that's been signed off by whoever, like the board in your organisation, whoever has to sign it off, so that you're not just applying for everything and anything that comes along. You've got a sort of a strategy of what you need funding for, how much it's going to cost, when it's going to start, how long you need the funding for, all those details in place, so that when you're doing your project matching with your funding applications and the grants that you're looking to apply for, that all that is ready and you can match those up. So again, give yourselves a score from 1 to 5. And be honest, we're not judging anyway. It's really just a tool to help you to identify where there might be room for improvement, and just, to prioritise those areas to work on. Okay, let's go on to the next question, number 3. So grant prospect identification and prospect matching. So that's just really about finding your prospects and who you're going to apply to. How do you find the right grant opportunities for your funding needs? Is it kind of last minute, or have you got a really good process in place where you know what the grant rounds are that are coming up, and that you are then prepared and not just not that kind of last minute thing. So you're submitting the application at the 11th hour, and sometimes, which can happen, sometimes it just doesn't go through because there's a problem with the system. So yeah, making sure that you're always prepared for that. So yeah, again, give yourself a score. If you've got a really good system, that would be a 4 or 5. If you think it's not so good, then maybe 1 or 2. Okay, so that's our first 3 questions. And I'm just going to move on to the next one. Application writing. And this is obviously relevant to the rest of the presentation today, with the talks with the other grant writers here. Do you have the skills to write your grant applications? Do you have them internally, or is there someone outside your organisation that you can call on to help with that? And really what you're aiming to do is just to have a strong application where you've really answered all the questions, and there's no kind of reason for the funder to not know what your project's about and what the outcomes would be at the end of it. I think quite often we find that organisations we work with are so wrapped up in, they know their own story, they know what they do, they know their projects, but articulating it to a funder is another thing, because they often don't answer the specific questions in the application form properly. They've got some really good information, but it doesn't answer the question. So that's a real skill as well. So again, yeah, give yourselves a score, 1 to 5. Okay, next question, question 5. Funding success and reports. Do you carry out all of your reporting and accountability on time for all the funds that you've received from your funders? Is there, or have you ever missed an accountability, just because you haven't got it recorded somewhere, or because the project team aren't ready with the information because there's not been that level of planning? So again, yeah, give yourselves a score 1 to 5 there. And how do you think you rate in terms of that kind of accountability and reporting back to the funder? Good. And then question 6. So donor stewardship, and this is a big one. this is, we say, is a really huge part of the actual application process. It's not just the writing, it's about building those relationships with the funders. You know, picking up the phone before you apply, talking to the funder and discussing the project with them. Yeah, and just making sure that you're exceeding their expectations. Yeah, because there's a lot of hard work to write an application, and you know, you need to sort of build that relationship with the funder as well to then help with your success rates. And it also, I think that the kind of gold standard with that is if you've really built good relationships with the funders, what we've seen with some of the people we work with is that through building those relationships with the funders, your organisation could be the one that they come to if they've got, say, extra money that they've got to spend at the end of the financial year. They come to you and say, hey, we've got this money, we'd like to give it to you for a project. And that's where, you know, because you've built that relationship with them, you've built that trust, and they know that you can deliver on the projects. And really that's the gold standard, where they come to you and offer you funding without you necessarily applying. Okay, so hopefully you've got all your scores together. So I'm just going to do a quick poll to see how we went. So can we launch the poll? Oh yeah, that's great, thank you. Yeah, just looking at how you rated within those three kind of score bands, 24 to 30, or 18 to 23, or 18 or below. Just give you another minute to fill in that. Okay, well, we got some results. How did you go? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so as quite often happens, is that a big amount that's scoring that kind of middle band, and that they're sort of doing okay. A few of you scored like over 24, so 24 to 30, and that shows that you're doing really well, and you know, keep up the good work, but always keep looking at, are there any of those areas where you scored slightly lower that you might need to put in a bit more work just to make sure that you stay on track. And for those of you that scored 18 below or below, thanks for your honesty. You know, we're not judging. It's really about that, as I was saying at the beginning, that capacity building and helping you to get to that stage where you've got all those things in place that will help you with your grant fundraising. So yeah. So we're just going to go through a little bit about some of those things that you might need to have in place to help with this if you haven't got such a great score there. So first of all, like getting ready for and getting fit for grant success. One of the basic things that you need is to have a really strong set of organisational key messages. So that's really just one central document where you've got all of your key information about your organisation, your mission, your vision, your history and your achievements, how you measure outcomes, all those kind of things centrally where everyone in your organisation that needs to can access them. And it just helps to sort of streamline that fundraising grants process enormously, because it's just there in one place. You know, you don't have to go scrabbling around for everything. And as well, like you can attach like the basic information like your charity's number, your other kind of just basic kind of registrations for different things like incorporated society. Just it's all there in one place that you don't have to go looking around for it. So if you don't have a key messages document, that's really, really a key one to get onto. Do you have a clear and current website? So for those of you who are joining us that are smaller, if you don't have a website, at least a fundraising page somewhere that you can have your organisation's kind of news online. And we also need to make sure that those key messages that we're talking about earlier are consistent across all of our media. So like with your Facebook page, social media, and your website, that you're all kind of singing from the same song sheet, really. And because funders do, they look at your website and they look at your online presence. So you want to make sure that all of those areas have got the same message as well. And do you have like a prioritized wish list? This is what we were talking about earlier. You need to have that wish list in place, and it needs to be signed off so that you're just applying for those projects which your organisation really needs. And it's also backed up by project plans and budgets. And by that we mean like having, for each project that you're going to fundraise for, you have maybe just a 1 or 2 page project plan with all the kind of key questions that you might see in an application form, so that you've got the really clear, this is what the project's about, this is why it's needed, this is who we're helping, and this is how much money we needed, and all that budget information as well. So just having that in place before you apply. And do you have a list of funder deadlines? So I'll talk a bit more about this in a moment, but just making sure that you've got a place to find your funder deadlines and to keep a track of them. And do you have someone to write good applications? It might just be that you need someone to help you with some upskilling, like internally. So just to get a sense check of how you're doing. And quite often we also review people's applications. And I know Hui E have done it with some free grant writing sessions, which is really great to give that feedback on applications and really support you in building the capacity to write those applications yourself, and picking out those bits where you need to focus on to really make a difference to strengthen your applications. Also, do you have like some kind of donor database, a CRM, where you're just tracking who you've applied to when? For some of you, it might also be a CRM that monitors your or your kind of individual fundraising as well, individual donors, and also just to keep track of those funding applications that you've put in, and make sure that you don't lose any of that valuable information. And you also need really to have a plan for a diversified kind of fundraising revenue, just to be sustainable. Obviously you can't just go for individual donors or just for grants, because if one of those like fall through, something happens like the pandemic and one drops off, you need to have like another sort of string to your bow to make sure that you've got another way to look for fundraising, your fundraising income, sorry. So also looking at monitoring and your kind of organisation and your key performance indicators of how you show that you're achieving your outcomes. What kind of tools do you use to measure? Like, have you got evaluation frameworks in place? Have you got educated project leaders? And by that we mean people that know what's needed as part of the grant fundraising process. Like I was saying before about, they need to know like what's expected, like, okay, so when it comes to reporting time, these are the dates they've got to report, this is what's expected, and show them, the reporting template that the funder's given you, if there is one, just so that they're really prepared and they're on board with everything, and they're not going to delay the process because they didn't know what they had to do. Also, coming back to talking about outcomes, you need to be able to show those really clearly to the funders. That's a question that quite often is not so well answered in quite a lot of the applications that we see. People don't understand about outcomes and outputs, and that kind of confusion can lead to them not answering the questions properly. So the outputs being the sort of quantifiable things, what you can count, like running a workshop for 10 people, as opposed to the outcomes of the benefits of that, of attending that workshop for the people that attended. So whether it's some kind of workshop that has helped them to increase their confidence or their well-being in some way. So they're usually the outcomes of those kind of those responses that use words like increased, improved, and those kind of things to show how the change has been made. there's just something coming back to quickly about where we find grants. So for those of you that don't know, we have a grants database called GEM Portal and GEM Local for the smaller organisations, which has all of the funders in Australia and New Zealand, has all the local councils, government, all the philanthropic funders and corporate foundations. And so what that does is it allows you to build a customised grants database based on the type of work that you're doing, who you're, who you're fundraising for, whether that be like disability or environment or whatever, and also based on the geographic location that you operate in. So it really takes a lot of that research time out of it, because we're doing that already. We've got this up-to-date database, and we've got researchers that are working like the equivalent like 80 hours a week to keep it up to date and to make sure that all those funding deadlines are on there, and also that you get notifications when new deadlines come up, when new grant rounds come online. So it's really helping you to streamline that whole process of finding funders that are relevant to your projects. So if you need to know more about GEM Portal, I'm happy to answer questions about that, or there's also more information on our website. So please feel free to get in touch with us about that. So that's me. That's the end of the little grants health check that we've been through. Thanks for participating and for your honesty with your answers, and hopefully now you've got some areas that you can work on and some practical points that you need to focus on to really get your grant strategy in place. So if you've got any questions, or if there are any that have come up in the chat, then I'm happy to have a quick answer of those.
Thank you, Ruth. That's great. Really, really good practical roadmap for organisations. I think even those who are just starting off with grant funding. And I also wanted to just quickly mention that organisations that are members of Hui E, there's a discount to use Strategic Grants GEM Portal, and so we invite you to get in touch with us to get that discount code as well. And it's also on our website. And Ruth, you mentioned something about the support that Strategic Grants offers in terms of reviewing application. Is that part of your membership, or is that something that organisations can access on a kind of
so there's we look at it on like an organisational basis, and we do review, and there is a charge for it, but it depends on the factors like the organisation, and we have special rates for the smaller organisations as well. So if you need some support with that, then do get in touch and we can talk to you about that as well.
And we had a question in the chat was about what software would you primarily recommend for managing grant applications? Perhaps that's something outside of the GEM Portal that you offer. Have you got another software?
For managing grant applications, well, in terms of what GEM Portal does, so you can actually input you put in the details of the application that you've submitted, so it will keep a record of those applications. It doesn't actually push through to apply for applications for you online, but it does have that kind of small kind of CRM aspect of you can then just keep track of your grant applications that you've submitted, the ones you're planning, and it also you can push through a report which comes down into Excel, which will show you how you're tracking for your board reports and things, which is just really great and really easy to use.
And there's another question that was Joe is asking about the best way to know or research or find out about how much to apply for from each fund.
That's a good question. Yeah. So GEM Portal has a lot of that kind of information in there. So what our researchers do is, and you can do as well, you look for look at the past funded on the funders website, see how much they've given in the past. If they don't already say on their website, some of them will tell you, maximum grant is 5,000, so you've got an idea there. But if they don't have any kind of indication like that, then try and find out the past funded amounts. You can also look on Charity Services website, look at their organisation. If there's an organisation that's got accounts on there, you can sometimes look at their accounts and see in their what their kind of total grant revenue is. So you might be able to get an idea then, because for some, you know, it might just be a really small amount, like their total pot of grants that they've got to give out is only like, I don't know, 10,000. So then that's going to give you an indication, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to apply for maybe more than a few hundred or 1,000 maybe. So it's really looking at the information that you've got available on their websites as well. But if you really don't know, then as you know, we recommend like phoning the funder just to check in with them, you know, that you're going for the right kind of level as well.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. I reckon from our experience, what we find working with funders is that if you haven't got a relationship yet with your funder, do try and apply for a reasonable amount, and they're more likely to grant you a reasonable amount, and then you can start building your relationship. They can get to know you, they can get to know how you manage your project, how you report on your project, and they're probably more likely to then increase that funding going forward.
That's right. It's like building that trust that we were talking about before, and yes, maybe starting a bit smaller and building up. Yeah. And also just to make sure that you've got realistic costs as well. You're not over inflating it. So make sure that your budget is accurate, and just applying for what you really need.
And Ruth, are you happy for us to share your email address with those on the call as well?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
If you could pop it in the chat, that would be great.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Ruth, for your presentation and for your time. That's really great. I think hopefully people really gained something from that.
Yeah.
And so there will be more opportunity to ask questions, to share ideas, to talk to each other about your experiences as well. And that's kind of where we want to move to now. Ruth is going to stick around for a little bit longer, so she may be in some of the breakout groups, or if you can stay for even longer than that, maybe stay for Q&A afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you, Ruth. So the email address is in the chat. So what we would like to do now is break you into smaller discussion groups, really to give you an opportunity to kind of reflect on what you've just learned, but also look at a couple of questions that you would come across when you apply for funding. Some more generic questions about your organization. So what does your organization do, and why does this work need to be done? These are very common questions that we see in funding applications. We have in each of the groups that will break you into, there is a facilitator or somebody who's supporting the conversation and who has experience in grant writing and fundraising as well. So I will get you into your groups now, and we will come back in about 12 minutes. So and then there will be an opportunity to feedback. So if you want to feedback to the wider group about what you've learned, some tips that you gained, and there'll be some more opportunities to ask questions. So I will open the group. So you will find that a pop-up on your screen will appear, and you click to join the group, and yeah, we'll come back in about 12 minutes.
I was still answering a question. I'll just finish it up in the chat.
Please do. Thank you, everybody, for coming back. It's great. And everybody took to the very last second to come back into the room, which means that there must have been some very fruitful conversations. And I realized that it was a very short time, so we wouldn't have been able to get to all the questions and discussions. We are going to leave the room open for another half an hour after 1 o'clock, and you're very welcome to stay and finish up your conversation, share some more of your experiences, and connect with each other. So yeah, please do take the opportunity to stick around. I also invite those who've been in the groups, if you want to continue your conversations, if you're happy to share your email addresses with each other, feel free to pop them in the chat. especially those that have facilitated. If you're happy to be contacted by those that you had in your room, please feel free to put it in the chat. So we won't have time to go through each of the groups and collect feedback from your groups, but if you had particular feedback from your discussions in your breakout room just now, please feel free to just pop them in the chat as well. Any key pointers, key tools, resources, some key ideas that you've learned, feel free to put them in the chat and share them with the rest of us as well. But I just want, before we finish our formal session at 1 o'clock, I want to give you some more information about our Hoa Putea Moni program. So this is a program that we developed in the first lockdown in March last year. So it's really hands-on grant writing support that we offer to small and medium community groups. And it's a one-off support where we match you with a volunteer grant writer to help you write your first funding application for up to $50,000. Over the last financial year, we matched 47 groups with 40 skilled volunteers and had about $250,000 worth of funding as a result of coming out of that for the community groups. Also, I want to highlight this is a free program, so it doesn't cost anything for you to join our program. And but we do ask you to register on our website, and the link is on there, which I will post in the chat. Maybe I can ask for Shell to just quickly pop it in the chat. Also, if you are an experienced grant writer, we'd love to welcome you on board of this program as well. So I'd be happy to have another chat with anybody around what that might involve. If you have some free hours over a month where you can support a small community groups with their grant funding, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, any questions, do get in touch with us. A couple of other things I wanted to pop in the chat as well is a LinkedIn group that I've come across that was shared with us by one of the grant writers that we work with. That's a LinkedIn group for grant writers to connect with each other. So you are very welcome to use this one as well and join it. The other information, discount code that we can share with you to access the GEM portal, that strategic grant that Ruth was talking about earlier. So please get in touch if you would like to have that code. Please get in touch with us and we'll make sure you can access that at a discounted rate. Then just finally, just want to let you know, so we are going to run another couple of sessions in November that we will let you know about as well. So this is all part of our spring webinar series. And with that, I will finish us off with a karakia, but as I said before, invite you to stay around for up to another half an hour. We'll leave the room open. Oh, thank you. Rochelle has popped it in the chat. I want to thank again Ruth for joining us. I see she's still there. And sharing your experiences and your wisdom, for Peter, Ian, Emily and Sally to facilitate our breakout sessions, and to all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much. Ka whakairia te tapu, kia wate ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, hui e tai ki. So thank you everybody. For those who are leaving us, have a wonderful afternoon and thank you.